Hi, my name is Leo Bertari. I'm founder and managing partner of Peer Innovation and also the author of 3 books. The first of the 3 books is called The Power of Peers, and it's how and why peer groups work so well. The second book was titled What Anyone Can Do, and it was essentially about what's possible for individuals when they effectively enlist and engage the help of others. And third is Peer Innovation, what peer advisory groups can teach us about building high-performing teams. So over the last 10, 12 years plus, I think, I've spent time really looking at peer groups, both here in the US and all over the world. And it's one of the reasons Vistage had asked me to address to you today, to talk about being a new member and what that's about and what that can feel like, and basically how to maximize the experience. So let me do this. Let me start a little bit by talking about, I'm going to introduce the material just a little bit in terms of the arc of these 3 books, where they came from, and I hope it kind of helps set the table for you as a brand new member. So I actually worked for Vistage during a time in my career. It was like between 2010 and 2016, and it was late 2012, and I led a brand refresh for the company. And during that time, I'd be talking to CEOs and key business executives, and I would ask them, how do you learn? How do you grow? How do you bring new ideas into your company? And sure enough, people would tell me all kinds of things, right? They read books, they hire coaches, they have consultants, they go to events and conferences, they go to executive development programs at Harvard and Stanford and great places like that. But at least in an unassisted way, they weren't bringing up joining a peer group. It really wasn't even part of their consideration set. So I remember back then going to the board of directors and saying, look, I feel like we're trying to sell a Mercedes to someone who doesn't even know what a car is. So why don't we maybe take a step back? Let's look at this entire category, not just at Vistage and how Vistage does it, but how all of these peer groups work, again, here in the US and throughout the world. And that's what the first book was essentially about. And it really took a deep dive into how and why these groups work really well. About a year after that, I had a podcast, and it was called The Year of the Peer in 2017. Had a definite beginning and an end, but I interviewed these 50 amazing people, all incredibly successful. And I would ask them, where did you get, how did you get so successful? I mean, did you do it all by yourself? And of course, they would tell me, oh, no, not in a million years. They would laugh at the idea. There were countless people that helped them get to where they are. The idea was, how do you enlist people's support? How do you have the courage to ask for help? How do you engage them and make public what it is you want to do? Because when you do that, you are likely to do the things that anyone can do far more often, which is often very much the key to success, right? Third, of course, when I think about peer innovation and what peer advisory groups teach us about building high-performing teams, over the years, as I'm working more and more with these peer groups, I'm thinking more and more that, all of these things that work so well and make peer groups so effective are really effective also for high-performing teams. And time again, as I've worked with cross-functional work teams and departmental work teams, it has certainly held true. So as a member, I think about, here you are in this experience where you can become part of a Vistage group and not only learn week after, or month after month, I should say, what the speakers may have to say or what you may learn from other members, but to really be able to imagine how you go about doing that, right? The idea that you will effectively learn how to listen better. You'll learn how to ask better questions. You'll learn to listen for understanding without judgment, all of the kinds of things that will help you be a better leader, and also for you to lead more collaborative environments back at your organization. So this is what really this is all about, and why Vistage has asked me to come is I want to look at some of the findings that we've had and been advanced since 2015, 2016, to talk about what that can mean for you about being the very best member you can possibly be, number one, for everyone else around you, but second, how you can squeeze the most value possible out of your Vistage experience. So let me start with making your membership count and what that looks and feels like. And I want to begin by one of the major findings that we had in the Power of Peers was this idea of the learning achieving cycle. Now, the learning achieving cycle is fascinating, right? Because it basically sets up this idea that we learn better when we learn together. And we know this. There's mountains of evidence and decades of research from social learning theory that tell us about that. And interestingly enough, Josh Bersin had a great study in 2019 that is very similar to a lot of things that I've seen over the years, which essentially tells us this. When we review material one time, we're likely to remember about 28% of it for 24 to 48 hours. If we review it a second time, that number climbs to 46%. However, if we engage in conversations with others and share ideas and concepts and experiences with one another, then all of a sudden that number goes to 69%. Now, of course, the interesting thing about being part of a Vistage group is you're not really here just to get knowledge acquisition, right? It's not just about that. What you want to be able to do is recognize that you're also part of an ensemble that not only helps each other learn and understand better, but you give one another the courage and the encouragement to act on that learning. And when you do, even if there's a little trial and error here from the applying to the achieving, once you start achieving something really great for yourself or your organization because of something you learned, this is a cycle that you want to repeat. So this we found to be very, very powerful. And when we think about it for our teams back at our companies, right? Look at any team, whether it's a company team or a sports team. The greatest teams in sports, I'll use this as an example. Think about the ones that are either always winning the championships or they're always part of the conversation. When you think about it and when you look at it and interview people who are in those organizations, winning the championship really isn't the goal. The goal is, how do we get better every day? How do we learn and grow? And effectively, how do we learn, share, apply, and achieve together, right? With the idea that if we do that and we do it really well, then championships become the reward. And I think in business is very much the same way. And I've certainly seen it with many experiences that I've been fortunate enough to have throughout my life as well. But the thing about the learning achieving cycle is that it doesn't happen by just putting a bunch of people in a room and hoping for the best. And this is where you're going to really experience this firsthand as a Vistage member. So I want to talk about the 5 factors that we found really powerful and really common to high-performing groups and teams. But let's think about it from the group perspective for the moment. First of all, it's having the right people in the room. So let's look at that in 3 ways. 1, if you're part of a chief executive group, for example, or maybe even a small business group, it's likely, of course, that you're the chief decision maker in that company. You share that common challenge with everyone around that table. And there's really nothing quite like it, right? Second, is you're going to look, as you start working together, you're going to agree on shared values and practices and behaviors that you feel make you and everyone else really effective, so that this group starts developing its own culture. And that, again, becomes extremely powerful in helping you become more effective and efficient about the way you use your time together and how well you do that. And then third, of course, is the diverse perspectives that you bring, of course, right? You all have different experiences. You come from different industries and different backgrounds and likely different race and gender and all kinds of things where you have this incredible collection of voices at the table. And what you come to realize really soon is this is not the chair's group. This is everyone's group. And importantly, this is your group. So when you think about what it takes to be that good contributor, right? Modeling behaviors that you want for yourself and expect from others. And at the same time, as you're thinking about that, imagine who else you might want to ask to join you at that table who would bring that voice, that would bring that perspective, that would add that much value to your group. And I think when all of you recognize that that's a part of your responsibility in terms of growing the group, making sure that you get all the value possible, that becomes a real turning point. Second finding we had was psychological safety. Now, you're probably familiar with psychological safety largely from Project Aristotle in Google, even though the concept has been around since 1965 when Edgar Schein and Warren Bennis were talking about it. And certainly Amy Edmondson at Harvard Business School has advanced the study of psychological safety. But for a group, we also found that it's very, very powerful. And as you see these 5 factors, they run in a reinforcing loop. So once you have the right people, establishing and psychological safety becomes essential, right? Well, what does that look like in a group? Well, for a group like Vistage, it's really about being open and vulnerable in a way that's going to be probably very different from any other meeting or situation you may have been in the past. Now, for some of you, if you've participated in peer groups before, whether they're industry specific or not, it'll be interesting for you to see that when you get into a Vistage group experience, it really is about being very transparent. being able to talk about what you don't understand, what you're afraid of, what you're concerned about, what's next around the corner, and how you might respond to it. So it's a very amazing opportunity that you will get, that you truly want to make sure that you leverage the best you can. Second, it really is the place where you get to put your best foot forward, where in most cases we're putting our best face forward, right? Whether we're going to a social event and we're all dressed up and everyone asks us how we're doing and everything's great, or on our social media, right? Everyone's social media feed has their highlight reel. I mean, they're like the greatest thing in the world, right? According to their social media feed. I think we all know that when we get around the table and we can be real with one another, this is where we can help each other be truly great. And then finally, the thing that really makes psychological safety so solid in a group experience is that confidentiality is sacrosanct. What happens in the room, or what even happens on a Zoom call, or wherever you are all together, it stays there, and you know that. And it's basically it's a solemn promise you're making, among one another, that that's the situation. So now that if you've got the right people in the room who have that diversity, who share those, behaviors that make you effective, if you're truly trying to be open and vulnerable, what does that do? It helps you bring more deeper issues, to the table, more topics to the group. And this really speaks to productivity. So from a productivity perspective, it really is about the quality of the topics. Now, unlike a lot of things that you may participate in, you're going to learn really quickly, if you haven't experienced this already, that Vistage is not a spectator sport. This is not sit back and give me content and I take notes and I go away. You represent the lion's share of the intellectual and emotional capital in that meeting. So when you're all bringing your A games, when you're all feeling psychologically safe, bringing quality topics to the table and diving in deep with one another in that regard, that's where the value is. And that's really, really powerful. There's also an aspect of this that will take some practice over time, and it's really around the discipline of the dialogue. Now, what I'm talking about here largely is in your executive session. You may, in many meetings, right, you're going to have maybe a speaker in the morning, and then you'll have the afternoon where you're going to work together. Issue processing is clearly one of the dominant ways that you will go about dealing with all of these topics, right? I think the more practiced you get at that and the more you put into asking really good questions, the better off you're going to be. And your chair is going to be invaluable at helping you be able to embrace that. And also you're going to find that it's something, again, that you'll be able to bring back into your company as well. And third, when you really think about the value of productivity, right? Because we can give you all the psychological safety in the whole world and make you feel really great and have you feel like, hey, there's no other environment like this. But you also have to feel that there's some real benefits from it for you as an individual and for your organization. And by the way, there's a bit of a feedback loop around this regarding psychological safety as well, that I've seen time and time again with groups all over the world. And that is, the more that you see real tangible value, the more that you are likely to stretch the bounds of your vulnerability when it comes to leveraging that psychological safety, because you're going to really see that it's worth it. It's worth it for yourself and it's worth it for everyone there. Fourth, I want to talk about culture of accountability. But I want to be really clear about what this means. First of all, this is not about accountability to the chair, okay? This is accountability member to member. And every group is different, quite frankly, in terms of what this looks like. The important point of accountability is not that it's onerous, not that it's some other thing that you've got to deal with, because God knows you are held accountable already, in so many ways to so many people. But really to have a culture of accountability, which is much more in line of accepting personal responsibility for bringing your A game, right? For being that person who shows up, in a way that's going to help you and everyone else get value, right? So that's what we're really looking at. It's those shared values and practices that you start coming to agree upon that are really, really important to your group. You want to make sure that you're living up to those and that others are doing so as well. That's really accountability number one. The second version of accountability really comes up with regard to the follow-up and follow-through on the topics that you may engage with your fellow members. So for example, if I bring a topic to the group and we go through the issue processing, and at the end of that conversation, I'm hearing some things and I'm thinking to myself, okay, here's what resonated with me. Here's what I plan to do going forward. Now come the next meeting or the meeting thereafter, after I've had time to make those steps and take those steps, I want to be the one that initiates this, make sure that I'm reporting back to the group and telling everyone what happened. Not only from the perspective of feeling a level of gratitude for all the time that all of these incredible people have spent in helping me with that, but also, let's face it, it's a learning opportunity lost every time we don't really follow up and follow through. We can all have a great conversation anticipating what we think might happen, only to, lo and behold, maybe something else transpires. And we want to make sure that you're bringing that back to the group so that everyone benefits from that learning. And finally, I want to talk about leadership. And this is, I think, very, very important when you consider the chair. Now, again, we studied, groups that have been professionally facilitated, led by members on a rotating basis. And the reality is that no matter what type of person or what the leadership setup is, the leadership responsibilities are the same. Now, I think in your case, you're actually, really fortunate to have a professional facilitator who's really able to lead this group, I think, in a very powerful way. But I want to talk about what that leadership model looks like and what you're likely to find with your chair. One is your chair is going to be a servant leader. Your chair is not there as the grand Oz and you are all the members in the room. That chair is there to help you be successful, you and your organization. They're there to serve you. They're not there for their own self-aggrandizement. They are truly, there for the work and to do good, for all of their members. And I think it's what you're going to find common to chairs who become, certified to lead groups at Vistage. Second is you're going to find too that chairs consider themselves a part of the group, not apart from it. So it's not like the chairs on one side of the table and there you all are on the other. You are all in this together. You are going to win together, celebrate together, laugh together, cry together, whatever that happens to be. But you are all part of it, and you all share equal responsibility, for the group's success, quite frankly. And I'm going to show you a model for that just in a moment, which will help illustrate that point. And then finally, too, as you might imagine, as the servant leader, he or she has his role to lead the group. And on the other hand, part of that is to make sure that they are a steward of the other four factors. They're always going to be making sure that you have the right people in the room exhibiting those right behaviors, right? And working with you all to make sure that all of the value that you can be getting, that you are in fact getting, that you are really leveraging your psychological safety. Having a safe environment is one thing. Truly leveraging and taking advantage of it is quite another. And psychological safety isn't something that you get, you just check off the box and move on. It's something that constantly has to be nurtured. And it's the same thing not only for the group, but as you see this take place in your group, you're going to see how this might look actually in your organization and get real insights into how to bring it there as well. Third, of course, is productivity. They always want to make sure that they're going to help you bring members to the group. If you're in a CE group, for example, or an SB group, or get one-to-ones with your chair, use those one-to-ones to help prepare those issues to bring to the group. And that's a very, very important part of what those one-to-ones can be for, so that everyone is truly getting value for that. And then, of course, in the culture of accountability, again, the chair is not the enforcer of the culture of accountability among members. I mean, it's almost even silly to express it that way. But they do serve as the backstop. And I'm going to show you a model for that as well, in terms of what accountability for a group can look like in a way, again, that serves you, as opposed to something that's just something else you've got to worry about. So on the leadership model, instead of, again, having this kind of the all-powerful leader and all of the members kind of underneath, we worked with Dave Logan, who wrote a book called Tribal Leadership a number of years ago. And what we looked at, and he loves triads, and so do we, and we sat down and looked at a leadership model where it truly recognizes the leader, the group, and the member as part of one, right? Remember I mentioned the leader being part of the group, not apart from it. What you'll also see is that the leader, the group as an entity, and the individual member all have shared responsibility for the results, or quite frankly, whatever you want to put in the middle. Could be accountability, could be fun, it could be anything. but you all share in that. And the more early on that you recognize that you all share in that, the better and more healthy the group becomes. Finally, with regard to accountability, I want to share a model that we looked at there. So you remember our triangle, right? Again, the leader remains a part of the group, not apart from it. They are connected to it. But what this simply shows is that accountability rests between the individual member and the group. So that's where it sits. That's where it needs to live. And rather than the leader being the enforcer of the culture of accountability, the leader really serves as the backstop. And I'll give you an example of what the chair, what that backstop role might look like. So let's say, for example, that I process an issue with your group, and I come back the next month, and maybe I get distracted by something, and I don't raise the issue. I don't even bring it up. Well, some of you around are going to be thinking, hey, Leo, didn't you process an issue with us? And I'm going to be like, oh, yeah, sorry, and I'll talk about where I am with it and what's going on. In the unlikely event that I don't bring it up and not one other member asks me a question about it, that's when the chair can come in and really serve as that role in the backstop to make sure that that conversation doesn't get lost. Again, both from an accountability perspective and to make sure that we don't have a learning opportunity lost. So why this matters so much, and I think this speaks for me as to not only why this matters so much to you all in terms of starting as a Vistage member and what this experience can be like for you, but it's really why I've dedicated my life over the last decade or so to this work and why I think it's so important. And it comes in the form of a story. The woman's name is Carol Tometsko. Now, Carol Tometsko is the CEO of a genetic testing company, essentially, in Rochester, New York, called Litron Laboratories. She and her husband started the company together in 1976. Prior to that, they were actually both professors at the University of Rochester. She loved it there. She just stayed there for the rest of her life. He couldn't stand it. And so he wanted to start this company, and he kept asking her to come do it because he needed a lot of her technical expertise. And she finally acquiesces and says, okay, I'll do it. And she packs up, leaves the job she loves, and the two of them go and start this company. Well, I'm going to fast forward about 18 years. They've got this company. It's going well. They got really great at securing government grants. They were profitable. They did some really good work. And at the 18-year mark, her husband died suddenly. So in addition to having to deal with the grief of having lost her husband, she now has to play the role of CEO, which was not the role she played in this company, a company that she clearly now cares a whole lot about in terms of the work, the people, and everything else. So she had talked to her friend about it, and the friend said, you know what, tell you what, I know there's a CEO group in town, and it actually happened to be a Vistage group in Rochester. And he said to her, you know what, they don't know anything about genetic testing, but they probably know a whole lot about how to run an organization. Why don't you think about joining that group and see what that's like? So she joins the Vistage group. And as I recall her telling this story, she was like in her fourth meeting. And people are starting to get a sense of her business, which in her world had a lot of these scientists that were pitted against one another to try to see who would get the patent first. And so sure enough, one of the members said, hey, I don't pretend to know anything about your business, but it would seem to me, he said, is there any way you could ever get these scientists to collaborate? And if you did, couldn't they get a lot more done a lot more quickly? And she just paused for a moment, thanked the person, and that was that. A day or two later, she goes to her chief scientist at her company and says, what do you think about this? There's some people we can test this with. And sure enough, they do the test, goes great, they expand it, and it was like incredibly successful. Fast forward another 17, 18 years after that, and they'd completely got off the business model of securing government grants, and they're actually serving labs in 37 countries around the world. She tells this story because it was a big aha moment about collaboration. I'm telling you this story because one member in a given meeting where that member was really paying attention and listening asked her one question, a question that she probably stopped asking herself a long, long time ago, that changed the trajectory of her entire company and, quite frankly, her life and that of her employees. This is the power of being in a peer advisory group. And I think specifically, this is the power of what being a Vistage group can really be all about. It's about really being there and recognizing, I'm going to show up, I'm going to bring my A game. I'm going to do my very best to leverage psychological safety in this environment I may not know anywhere else. I want to make sure I'm being as productive as possible in what I do for myself and my organization and what I contribute to others. I want to make sure that we create a culture of accountability among our members that really serves us and serves us well. And I also want to make sure that I'm really clear about the expectations of the chair to make sure that that chair is really clear on how to support you as an individual and how to support the group as well. I can't tell you how excited I am that you're going to embark on this journey as a Vistage member. I think you're going to get incredible value for it. Quite frankly, I'm going to leave you my contact information later. I would love to hear from you. If after 6 months or a year, you want to tell me a little bit about what your Vistage experience has been like, I would love to hear about it. So anyway, until then, I just can't tell you how much, really how excited I am for you, and just wish you, your company, and your family really, really well. Thank you.